Hi there, I'm Sue Hugo from Education Support Partnership. And if there are some of you out there who are not watching the football, who are interested in a few minutes of discussion or thinking, reflection around how to maintain a reasonable work-life balance in what is really a very challenging profession. So that's what I'm here to discuss with you today. Education Support Partnership, the charity that I represent, is one of the very few charities out there that work exclusively for the support of the people who work in schools, both teachers and support staff. They've been around for around about 140 years, and they do a range of good stuff, including lobbying Parliament, but also their first and most high-profile function is a support line which runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I'll give you the number at the end. And if at any stage, any part of your life, your work, your thinking feels like you need additional support in confidence, you can phone the charity and talk to somebody who knows what you are, knows your world and your job, and will understand and will be able to give you the support and perhaps the signposting that you need. One of the other things that the charity do is that they provide emergency grants and hardship funds for essential major expenses which are having an impact upon your health and well-being. So to give you an example of that, we had a story recently about a teacher who was in rented accommodation in London, a single parent with 2 kids, who had to move because her rent went up and was asked to provide a down payment on her rent plus a couple of months in advance, and couldn't possibly, for her new place, couldn't possibly find that kind of money, and was actually facing the prospect of eviction. She applied to the charity and they were able to provide a down payment for her to be able to move into her new accommodation. At the other end of the scale, we have a story of an NQT who had a new job working on the south coast, could only get to her new job by train, and actually found that she was ever so slightly late for work every time because of the way the timetables ran. So she applied to the charity and they were able to provide her with a bike, which got her to work on time. So there's 2 very different examples, and we have many more of the kind of good work that those emergency grants can do. We'll also help with people who may need additional help with funding training or development which they can't manage or which the school isn't able to provide for them. And again, there's a possibility, means-tested grants that can help you with that too, either moving into the profession, moving within the profession, or even, dare I say it, those of you who are moving out of the profession. But I always want to say that bit just a little bit more quietly because we want to hang on to as many of you as we possibly can. Now, when we look at the subject of work-life balance, it's a really tricky one because no one person can actually give another person work-life balance. What that looks like for each individual is completely different. But the difficulty you have in teaching is that it is a job where it is really challenging to actually establish some kind of work-life balance because the job never finishes. Now, if you've ever worked in any other job, maybe not in teaching, you might begin to recognize the differences between the people that work in the way that you work in a school and what it's like working elsewhere. It really isn't like any other job at all. I wonder if you've ever worked out why that might be. The most significant difference is to do with the timetable and the time, your relationship with time when you work there. Because of that sharp, rigid, inflexible timetable, what it means is when you work, you are continuously in a state of high alert, of hypervigilance. You're always aware of what the time is, down to the last minute. You work to a clock all the time. There's an absolute predictability about the way that you work, so that at any one time, any one of your colleagues will know exactly where you are and pretty much what you're doing at that time. So when you find that external inflexibility and then you combine it with the children who have a completely different idea about what they want to do and what you want to do, you get a paradox between the two. And what it means is that you continuously work and live when you're in school as if you're about to be interrupted. People hold the time in their head. They're always aware of where they are at the moment, but always what they need to do next in the next few minutes. They work to deadlines all the time. So you are very, very focused on hitting a certain point in your lesson or a certain point in your break, a certain point in your lunch hour at any one time. And it does mean that the work is very stimulating, very energizing, very motivating when you are at your best. However, it can also mean that it's extremely difficult to wind down from it, so that you continue in that state of kind of hypervigilance throughout the evening and sometimes throughout the weekends. If you're not careful, you can find that you never really come down until you get to the end of term. And then, as soon as you get to that point, you'll all recognize that moment where you're suddenly ill. Your body switches off, your immune system kicks in, and you have a big rush down from having pushed yourself throughout the term. One of the other things that means that work-life balance can be really challenging is the nature of the school day, the school term, and the school year. It's also that combined with the kind of people who are attracted to teaching, who are generally very, very committed, very vocationally based, really driven by a desire to do right by those children, to make a difference, to have an impact, and highly perfectionist in the way that they work. Now, when you know that at some point in the future, and then a couple of months down the line, you're going to get a break and you're going to get a holiday, that can lead you into pushing yourself harder in term time, because at some point you're going to get a rest. I actually read on your Twinkl feed recently, I think in the last day or two, somebody who was saving up her summer holiday in order to get some sleep. Now, if you book in your summer holiday for when you're going to sleep, that is going to be a challenge for your health and your well-being during the term time. It's an unnatural setup. Schools tell you when you eat, when you sleep, even when you can and can't go to the loo. And sometimes you have to work out whether you're going to go to the loo or have a cup of coffee, T or P, as they say. And it's sometimes a choice between the two. You put that together with the pressure to keep going, because I can go to the dentist or ring my mother or see my best friend or go back to the gym in the holiday. And what you've got is a very unnatural setup. You will tend to push yourself because of this prospect that you will go to at the end of some weeks. And ultimately, the effect of that on your health and your well-being is very, very negative. So ideally, you need to be able to take reasonable downtimes on a regular basis throughout the term, throughout the week, and really throughout each day. When you're at school, you are using huge amounts of physical and emotional energy. But you've kind of got two jobs. You've got the one you do that's pupil-facing or colleague-facing, and then you have another one which you do in the evening. And that requires a completely different kind of energy. That requires mental energy. That requires focus. And part of the reason that work-life balance is difficult for you under those circumstances is because you have so much to do outside of the classroom. Now, my suggestion to you is that you need to be able to get that extracurricular stuff, the marking, the prep, the data profiles, the pupil references, the report writing that you're doing now. When you are tired, strung out, and hypervigilant, all that work takes that much longer to do. So what we're looking at is the possibility of you being able to work sharper, faster, and get that out of the way so there is a little bit of you left at the end of the evening. Now, one of the ways of doing this is to recognize the transition point between when you finish your pupil or colleague facing day and when you start to do your prep or your whatever it is that you have to do in the evening or after school. Now, some of you will prefer to stay on the premises and keep going until the end of whatever it is you have to do for that day. Others of you need to leave, get home, and start again in the evening. Either way, what you choose to do with that transition point between finishing one type of work and starting the other can make a significant difference as to how effectively you're able to mark or prep or write your reports. You need to get your brain out of its hypervigilant, high alert, reactive state into what they would call a parasympathetic response, where you come down from your fight or flight response to somewhere where you can focus, you can reflect, where you can assimilate information in a calmer and a more deep focused way. Now, there are lots of things that can help with that depending on your context and where you are. For example, the simplest and easiest way to do it is to go for a walk. So if you're planning on staying on after school and getting on with your marking or your prep there, taking the time out to get out of the classroom, out of the school, and walk without your phone going, without using that time to be thinking, like, what do I have to do? Go through my emails, go in my head, go through my to-do list. But just walk and observe and breathe and think about nothing in particular. And if you're able to do that, let your brain file and assimilate some of the stuff you've been dealing with all day, that can be really helpful. If you have the good fortune to be able to do something else before you start on your prep in the evening, so if you're going to go home or whatever, it can be really great to do some exercise. You know all that stuff about how exercise helps, but actually the harder you have to work, and when you have a big pile of year 6 marking or year 10 essays to write, you can think you don't have time for the gym or to go to an exercise class or to play football or to whatever it is you want to do, go swimming or whatever. But actually, by doing something rhythmic, physical, and relatively mindless in that time, you may actually find that subsequently you're able to get into your concentration much faster and to work with greater focus. So looking at that transition point can be one of the key ways of actually making the work you have to do after class faster. The second thing you can think about is to not replicate your day in the evening. So when we talked about you being in a situation where you work all the time as if you're about to be interrupted, when you get into the evening, if you have your phone or your laptop with alerts on for when your Instagram feed comes through, when your Facebook posts are coming through, you are still maintaining that same kind of approach where you think you're going to be interrupted any moment. So you never reach genuine concentration. So the second thing you can do to help yourself is to turn off all alerts. Turn off all the other tabs on your computer, which are subliminal messages to you of saying, I've got that to do, I've got that to think about afterwards, and make yourself focus on one single thing at a time. Now, by so doing, and if you practice it consistently, using what they call the Pomodoro Technique, where you work without interruption at all for approximately 25 minutes, and then take a 5-minute break, and in that 5-minute break, maybe take a stroll around the house, put a load of washing on, walk out into the garden and back, but no more than 5 minutes. If anything comes into your mind at that time, just jot it down on a piece of paper. Don't look at it more than that, just to remind yourself for later, and go back to that task that you were focusing on. Now, this particularly works if you've got a spell of time. For example, if you've got Sunday afternoon with a whole pile of working to do, using the Pomodoro Technique can make that slightly faster and therefore carve you back some time for yourself. So the suggestion is 25 minutes of total focus on a single thing without interruption, 5-minute break, a second 25 minutes and a 5-minute break, third 25 minutes, and then you can take a slightly longer break. Now, for some people, 25 minutes isn't quite right. You need to try it out and see what you think. Personally, I found 30 to 35 works better for me because I take a while to get into my stride, as it were, but you'll try it out for yourself and see what works. But the 5-minute break shouldn't be any longer than that. Longer than that, you will go off the boil. You'll have to start right from scratch to get your brain back to where it was. But what you're essentially doing is allowing 5 minutes to file away the stuff that you've just learned so you don't get overloaded. So that's a second technique you might use. Something else you might consider is the transition point between finishing at the end of your working day and having whatever scraps of your evening is left for yourself. And you can mark that transition point by making a decision and writing down for yourself what you think are the 3 most important tasks that you have to do in your non-pupil facing time the following day. This means that when you get into really reactive mode, when you really can't think about what else to do next, you tend to do whatever presents itself to you, and you don't always do the things that are important. So by choosing and prioritizing in a reflective moment that no matter what happens the following day, these 3 things will get done, that can help you put your energy where it's meant to be and not where you get pulled into by the interruptions in your day. And making those the very last thing that you do, then you close up your bag, you put your bag out of sight, you put everything to do with school completely away. It will help you to draw a line underneath the end of your working day and give yourself then whatever part of your evening you have left. I kind of feel like even from the minute you get up in the morning, if you can work towards that point so that there is a space between the finish of your working and you trying to get some sleep, that can be really important. And you need at least an hour if you can do it. And this is no good if it's an hour at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. That's absolutely disastrous. You need to, if you can, pull yourself back to maybe 9:30 at night so that you have an hour which is away from work, away from emails, away from blue light specifically, so that you then have the opportunity when you go to sleep to actually get some sleep. Now, I'm coming to the close of what I could talk about now, but I could do a whole other 20 minutes on sleep and the importance of sleep. But if you can, make that an absolute priority to yourself. There are books and books at the moment out, and in fact, Matthew Walker's book, How We Sleep, Why We Sleep, has been in the top 5 of best-selling books at the moment for some months. Absolutely terrifying when you look at what happens to you if you carry a sleep debt for too long. And ideally, you need to avoid the habit of binge relaxation at the weekend to make up for the lack of sleep that you have in the day, in the week. So if you can, maintaining good sleep habits, roughly the same time to bed most nights, roughly the same time each day, you will find that consistently that will help with your general well-being and your ability to cope with the level of work that you've got. When you're at your best, you are superhuman and you do a superhuman job. But the more exhausted and stressed you get, the longer it takes to do simple tasks, and that's a vicious circle. So you need to see your term times as a marathon, not a sprint. Take really good care of yourself and recognize that you are not only your job. You have a life, and the harder you work, the more you need your friends, your family, your hobbies, and your sleep. So I hope that gives you something to think about. But if things do get on top of you, don't forget that you can call our helpline. It's 08000 562 561. Now I'll just see if there are any comments here that I need to answer. Let's see where they are. And because I am new to all of these things, it takes me a while to work out what questions that I need to answer. I've got plenty of comments here, and I'm glad that you guys are all getting something from it. That's good, but I don't see any questions here. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope that something I've said chimes with you somewhere and maybe gives you some pause for thought. Have a good evening, and let's hope England are winning. Good night.